Afternoon team, Corrie Parnell's my name, Wellington District Commander. Today and the days over the last 2 days here, police have been in attendance on parliamentary grounds. What I can advise you today in terms of up until now, we've taken a very much measured, graduated response with those that are occupying the grounds here and the protesters. We've worked hard in terms of engaging with the key organisers, trying to educate them and encourage them to peacefully desist from some of the activities we have observed. What's transitioned today, you would have seen, is a number of arrests, and we have moved now to a state of enforcement action. I can advise that we have now effected 120 arrests throughout the day. Look, it's been difficult conditions in terms of the weather. Started out with the rain this morning, and I'm very conscious of the additional pressures on our staff in terms of operating in a COVID environment and working with masks and also with what they're faced here dealing with today. We've continued to try and really encourage those persons present here to peacefully desist and effectively now have been trespassed from the grounds of Parliament. Despite our hope that they would do that willingly and peacefully, that hasn't come to fruition today. We will continue to bring in additional resources and they are joining us from right around the country both today and over the coming days, I anticipate. This was never going to be a short task ahead of us, and in addition we're also now well advanced in our planning to remove the vehicles that have impeded public flow throughout the last 2 days on Molesworth Street. And lastly, in terms of, we do acknowledge that fundamental lawful right to peaceful protest in this country. However, we have clearly seen a transition to activity that is impacting common New Zealand public. We've got a number of affected businesses in and around the environs here that quite frankly have had to close business, and in terms of that public freedom of movement is now being impeded. Our role will maintain law and order and fundamentally restore the peace, and that's what we'll stay focused on.
How many officers have you brought in?
So at this stage I've got 150 additional resources over and above my district resource of 900 staff, and I will continue to add to that in the coming days.
How are you going to move the vehicles from Molesworth Street?
So at this stage today we've done initial phase of that in terms of firstly, and we have done this last 2 days, engaged with where we can identify the owners of those vehicles. That's been met with a flat resistance in terms of their willingness to do that. So we've now moved this afternoon in terms of a police assisted with parking wardens from Wellington City Council, the issue of infringement notices. We'll continue to appeal to those owners of those vehicles to move. However, at some point I will have to move to a more assertive approach in terms of moving those vehicles.
How long
are you actually planning for this? You've mentioned over a couple of days, but what's your sense of how long this might take?
Sure.
How long
Yeah, difficult to put an end state on things, and again I'll continue to test and adjust our operational tactics in terms of what presents in front of us, but I anticipate we still are going to be into the coming days.
So have you had communication with the organisers of anyone for the protest in terms of the length or their intentions in terms of how long it's going to
Look, one of the difficulties here is there are so many different causes and groups here, and to some degree there is actually an absence of leadership. Yes, we have had good negotiations, certainly in the early stages, with organisers, and if you go back to the convoy genesis when the people first arrived here, good open lines of communication. We've transitioned beyond that now in terms of some of those communications aren't continuing.
Are you worried about the health risk to staff? We've got these crowd, low vaccination rates, no masks, really up in officers' faces.
Yep.
Are you worried about that?
Oh, very much so, front and centre, and the health and safety of our people and also the public's paramount. I'm really clear there. We're operating in a COVID environment. I can advise 2 of my staff have been assaulted today. They're now recovering, and unfortunately also in terms of some of those arrests today, I am aware there has been some minor abrasions in terms of those arrested. What I can advise is those people have been afforded the appropriate medical attention.
And what happens to the people who have been arrested, I understand that the charges wouldn't be enough to keep them on bail.
Sure.
But so they'll be bailed, but if they come back, they might actually be held.
Yep.
Held in
So
custody.
just to clarify that, so let's in terms of the 120 arrests to date, principally the charges are trespass or obstruction. They then go through to our police custody units, are processed, as rightly pointed out, they're being bailed for a court appearance. At the time of their release, they're also being issued with a written trespass notice, which comes into effect in terms of they aren't to return to this location for 2 years.
Are any of those charges for those assaults on the officers?
There's no assaults at this stage. So one of the important things to note in terms of our role, in terms of effecting arrests, and we've done this from the start of this, is evidence gathering. You all noted the presence of our staff in terms of forensic photographers. We capture that, and we always have that position to assess that and analyse and take appropriate action downstream.
Can tell us more about those assaults? What happens after the trespass notices if they return to Parliament grounds?
So they become a trespasser, and our intelligence cell will advise us. You'll note today we've got drones aerial, there's significant CCTV coverage here in terms of the location we're at, and again police will look to effect subsequent arrests if need be.
And
How
they'd be
injured are the
held in
police
custody
staff?
at that point because they would be breaching the original. They'd be at that point held in custody, would they? With are they in the prison potentially?
Sure, that would be a matter again for the court, so it would come through our pipeline, but once it goes to the district court judge, that would be a determination in terms of the subsequent bail conditions.
What's the status of the police staff that were injured?
Okay, so one staff member, unfortunately, in terms of the deployment of the OC spray, the tactics used there, for those that did observe those today, was where our staff have been dragged into the crowd. I'm very confident and that it was proportionate, appropriate to what they were presented with. You would have noted that had a side effect with the surrounding. That's what happens. Unfortunately, that was one of the injuries with our own person. They have since received treatment and recovered and actually still deployed at the present moment. The other one has suffered in terms of minor graze scratches in terms of the arrest phase.
And what resources are you seeking sort of outside of police to deal with, the disruption out there?
Sure, so we work across, I suppose, our government partners, but essentially at the present moment, the local body government in terms of our Wellington City Council. That's effectively those grounds exterior of where we are at Parliament here, the public roads systems, tow companies, and the broader in terms of across government.
Will there be people outside of Wellington as well?
Yes, that is. Yes, we've gone, as I say, this is a national operation now from a policing perspective, and I'll draw on those resources.
120 people have been arrested. What capacity do you have to arrest and process people, and how are you handling that?
Yeah, sure. So you might have seen the presence of corrections vehicle today in terms of the larger bus to complement our own resource there. What in terms of a police tactic here, it's we refer to mass arrest process, which we're well oiled in that process. And effectively it's a transition from those arrested to our custody units. We have multiple custody units across the Wellington district, which are all in full utilisation at the moment.
There have been some allegations from protesters about excessive force being used by police. What do you make of those?
Yes, look, there'll always be allegations of excessive force. I think if you've watched any of the footage today, which I have intently, our people have acted proportionately, fairly and very professionally in terms of what's presented in front of them.
What do you say to people? You spoke of behaviour today which is required.
Yes. So just in the early part of the day when we had that greater presence and in terms of, I suppose, deploying our removal of persons from the grounds, and you would have seen that we announced to them that you're now being officially trespassed from the grounds of Parliament on behalf of the Speaker of the House here. We gave them a period of time to do that. They failed to do that. There was an early presence there. We did see in terms of, I would say, some weapons in the form of the placard poles, sticks. In one case, we saw the presence of a knuckle duster. So again, it sort of signalled some sentiment, not with all, but with some of the current occupiers.
So
Yes. Oh, look, very much, again, come back to the principle and the fundamental right of all New Zealanders to go about a peaceful protest, and freedom of speech. We've worked really hard over the last 3 days, indeed, and right back to when the organisers were coming here. Those were good open lines of communication, but that over the ensuing days has eroded to a point where we're beyond the engaging, educating, encouraging. Well,
So do you have any end date?
There's still a number of children on the grounds at the moment. How does that influence?
yeah, very much so. So in terms of the operation plan, that's a significant risk factor identified in our planning, something we're very conscious of, my people are very conscious of. You would have seen today in terms of some of the early activities, placing children, quite frankly, in the front of adults is less than ideal. I can't control that, but what I can control is in terms of how we've dealt with those children.
What do you say to Wellingtonians who feel that the police were too slow to act?
Sure.
You know, given the mayor said this morning, he'd lost control, authorities have lost control of this part of the city.
Yeah, so we haven't lost control. There was always going to be a tall order. This is unprecedented for New Zealand. We've never had an occupation of this scale, and certainly with tents on Parliament grounds. So some degree uncharted waters. As I said at the start, it was never going to be a short process. I'm very conscious of that. It has to be a measured approach, and it will take some time potentially.
So do you have any idea on an end date? Do you have any idea on when you can give any end date to this?
No.
So it could be here for another week.
My intention, it won't be here for another week. As I said, I will continue to bolster my resources.
Police, though, have made very little progress over the course of the day.
Yes, we have.
What are your options moving forward? And
Yes.
at what point would you consider stepping up the level of police response?
Yeah, so that's my role to continually consider with the planning team. I won't go into the operational tactics that we intend to employ going forward.
Maintain the same presence we've seen today.
You'll
throughout
certainly,
the rest of the night, for example?
without question, you're going to see the same presence, and I need to stress, if nothing else, that will increase as oncoming resource
So you
comes.
guys,
The exact sort of line of police response.
Sorry, Sophie, I missed that first
Are we
bit.
going to see the same sort of police response go into the evening?
Certainly will, yes, yep. So again, come back to, we've now transitioned to an enforcement phase, and we execute that in terms of what's presented in front
In
of us.
your eyes, what was the point that this turned from being a peaceful protest? Because 120 arrests is clearly a peaceful protest.
No, it's not, and I think you saw the clear tone shift there this morning, right from the onset, and to a degree certainly in the previous days when there's occupation and erection of structures, tents, there's a clear shift in intent, I would suggest, in terms of some of the people that have occupied here. Not all of the audience here today have been here the entirety through the night, so that's a smaller cohort of people, which you will have observed. We've got around 70 tents out there. Some of those were lost overnight with the inclement weather. However, it is one of our priorities. We will deconstruct the tent city over the coming
Are you
days.
concerned about people essentially replacing those that disappear, that we might just see a roll, the crowd might not shrink, it might just roll and retreat?
That's always a possibility, identified risk for us, and again, as I said, we will continue just to adjust and test our own resource in terms of what presents for us to tour.
Is there anyone who hasn't had an opportunity to ask a question? Mitch?
Well, I just noticed today the numbers have been swelling. The people coming in through the bottom gate, there's nothing to stop them.
Sure. Yep.
And around their rings.
Yes, correct.
Is there no way you can stop them?
Yeah, when if you follow the sequence of the last 2 days, so peak audience is underway and the speeches have started to occur at 1100 hours each day. For those that have read online, there's a fairly set script here with the people. Police are well aware in terms of the activities and the plans, some of the disruption activity, the tactics they're looking to employ in terms of, I suppose, our response as well. So I'm conscious of all that, and again, we continue to test and adjust. You have a significant ground to police here, and hence some of that wider consideration for me now is calling on additional police resource and indeed private sector resource.
Okay, we're done, guys. Thank you. We've given it almost 20
Thank you.
minutes.